welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by a very prolific writer and a fascinating researcher. I am so excited to talk about early modern literature, Shakespeare plays, but also romance, writing for a popular audience versus for academic audience, and just getting into this absolutely delicious story. I am so excited. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your work, please?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Eloisa James, and I am a historical romance author, and I'm also a Shakespeare professor, although at the moment I'm writing full time. But yeah, I've done them in tandem for over 20 years. So I have, like one year I went to the Shakespeare Association in New York and the Romance Writers Association in New York. The next week they were back to back, and I presented papers at both. So when you say academic versus romance, I'm well versed in the turn from one to the other.
Wow.
But the research tends to be the same for both. So I'm here to discuss my book, The Last Lady Bee, which is just come out. And it is what I'm calling a Gothic adjacent novel. So I kind of made up the term because the person I was thinking about was Jane Austen and Northanger Abbey. And for those of you who've read Northanger Abbey, she makes fun of the genre of Gothic novels, which I think is great because we know her name was on the subscription list for all those Gothics that she's making fun of. So she was gobbling them up and making fun of them. And then she has this young heroine who's read way too many novels and is kind of like, silly as a result. My heroine's not like that, but she does have that self-aware sense that I stole from Austen of walking into a novel. She is married to an elderly man. She married to get her younger sister a dowry. And he had three wives, all of whom died in an abbey high up in Scotland, a haunted abbey. Supposedly each of them walks on their own battlement. And she's headed up there thinking about all the books she's been reading. So for those of you who are book lovers, The Last Lady Bee is sort of got that, hopefully has that sort of, I'm reading a book and I'm loving a book at the same time.
Yeah, I really love that. I love books that are about loving books and how books sort of can form your worldview and how you approach the world and how you interpret things. Speaking of interpreting things, before we get to the novel itself and your romance career, I'd love to ask about your research. I know bawdy puns in English boys' plays are involved, and I'm extremely intrigued by that.
Well, so I just got incredibly interested in puns. Puns are when you could say something two different ways. But when you're looking at the 1600s, and I'll say that I'm an expert, and this is how narrow academia is, right? I'm an expert from about 1600 to 1606, right? And boys' plays means plays that were put on by groups of boys, of whom there were a huge amount. And most of the playwrights, only two playwrights, didn't write for those boys' plays. They were very popular. Shakespeare was one of them, unfortunately. But he was a great punster. And the thing that interests me about puns is that in puns, you see living language. Because when somebody's making fun, let's just use a fairly docile pun on member, which can mean, a man's tool. It can mean a leg. It can mean an arm. You're cutting off a member. It can mean all kinds of stuff. You have a feeble member. It can mean that your brain isn't working. Those kind of jokes, you can see them pop up in a play and then spread through all the plays in London and then be out of fashion 2 years later. So for me, they're a fascinating window into what history was like at that moment. What kind of puns are happening? What are we making fun of? Penises? Are we making fun of, what are we making fun of? What do we think is funny? You can say the same thing now. Like my husband sends me pictures of rabbits jumping up and down, and I was like, oh, this is great. I'm thinking, why do I think this is so funny? Well, I can't answer. Some scholar in the future will be
Yeah.
like, let's look at all those rabbit videos they were changing, sharing.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And it is fascinating to hear that it sounds not unlike how memes spread today, although obviously the rate is much, much faster today. And I never really thought about how puns aren't necessarily, but can also be sort of like specific to their cultures to kind of work a specific way. That's very interesting.
Yeah, they're very rooted actually in their locality. So
Mhm.
a pun in Scotland is not going to work in London, that kind of
Mhm.
thing.
So, in terms of your journey to writing romance, I know that you have, throughout your books, incorporated a little bit of your professional background into them. You have some titles that pun on Shakespeare titles, and you have lots of references dropped throughout them, including this one. So, my first question is the way that you approach a new novel similar to the way that you would sort of get an idea for, let's say, an article or a monograph? Like, is there a common inception point, or is it a totally different process for you?
It's actually a quite different process. Yeah,
Mhm.
it'd be nice if it was, but no. An article generally comes out of me noticing something odd. Like, for example, one article that I have hanging around that I haven't finished is a very minor playwright. The hero of his play knits all the way through.
Mhm.
And, those are the things that fascinate me because we don't look back at the 1600s and think of heroes knitting. Hamlet's not sitting around clicking his knitting needles. Shakespeare was very conservative, and there were a lot of other playwrights that were much more out there. So that's a kind of, I see a problem I want to write about. I want to figure out how much knitting were men doing, how popular was that play, how popular was the company that put it on in that particular year. But a romance is different because a romance often comes out of like I have an idea for, you know, in this case, I was rereading at Northanger Abbey, which is not one of my favorite Austens by any means. And I thought, I just love the fact she's so sarcastic towards the genre she's writing in. I wonder if I can do that. And if I was going to do that, how would I do that? And if I was going to be Jane Austen, but also much more Dickens, because you'll notice there's a lot of reveals in this, right? And if every chapter is like reveal, 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 that was me adopting Dickens. And I went and looked at Dickens' notes, and he would have on the left side he'd have what's going to happen, and on the right side he'd have the characters who are in it, and with him it was all like what is going to happen next, next, next. So I had a lot of fun doing that. At the same time, my readership is mostly deeply interested in historical romance. So I like to set myself a challenge. I was like, okay, we have this Jane Austen side, we have the Dickens plot, and then we have the backbone of historical romance where I'm not going to go Gothic and get into like, violence and people being crushed by armors and the various things that happen in historical Gothics, but also in the more creepy ones. I'm not a creepy writer. I'm
Mhm.
just not. There is a ghost, but she's a very benign
Yeah.
presence, I would say.
A ghost I wouldn't mind encountering, I think.
Mhm. Let's hope he didn't have to, because she only really comes to your rescue. But
True, true. So another thing that I often, think about when it comes to either academic or professional persuasive writing, let's call it, versus writing a novel, which is that in professional writing, you need to front load your argument, right? You tell the reader everything that they are going to see, and then you
Mhm.
show it to them as you are showing it to them. And then at the end, you're like, look at what I showed you,
Right.
and you can't really do that in a novel. That's considered spoilers, for novel readers. Um, so I guess like, is the process different in the daily then, in the sitting down at the desk and doing the writing? Do you have different goals, different strategies to get the juices flowing if you feel stuck?
Um, it's labor.
Mm.
People make, I mean, I'm lucky. Like my parents were literary writers, right? But they my dad was a poet, Robert Bly. He was very much into this is labor. This is not anything mysterious. He
Mm.
wrote a poem, a new poem every single day, put it into a big bathtub he had sitting around full of poems. Um, and then he would rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, sometimes for 4 years before he would be published in the New Yorker or wherever. And he presented literature and writing as something that is labor, that shouldn't be frightening. So I can't say that I've ever been really stuck because his voice in my ear would say, well, just keep writing. If it's crap, you just cut it out later, right? And that is true for academia and for fiction. You are going to write utter crap. You just have to keep going. I mean, if you took The Last Lady B and looked at how much it was, before I start cutting and cutting and cutting, it's probably 4 times the cutting.
Wow.
I'm editing another Gothic adjacent novel right now, and on some very painful conversations with my editor at Simon Schuster. We've cut a major character, a minor character, and about 100 pages.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that's after I cut a ton of it already. But that's it. If it's just labor,
Yeah.
we can all labor.
That's so interesting. I think I do tend to lean into sort of like the magic or the mystical, romanticizing of writing that we tend to do. But anytime that I have personally been stuck, what I have done to sort of get over it is to be like, just write the worst version of the sentence that
Yes.
you can. Yeah. So that's
Yeah, academic, it's always like, it is interesting to note. It is interesting to, it's a
yes.
ghastly sentence you never want to leave in there, but you're like, let me just get to something. Sometimes you don't even know where that sentence is going to end. It's
Yeah.
interesting to know, what am I talking about? Okay,
Yeah.
let me think,
Let's just
but
get
at
the
least,
nouns and the names in there that we need and we'll,
yeah, figure it out. Write your way into it. I write academic and romance. I write my way into it.
Nice. So, in terms of our protagonist, our Lady Genevieve Hughes, I'd love to talk about shaping her as a character, and especially, since you write historical fiction, how do you treat that sort of, I guess, that tension between how romance has a lot of heroines who are at the same time of their time and ahead of it, because, we sympathize with them or we empathize with them and we can see ourselves in them. But then there are, every once in a while, there's an element that reminds you that they live in a very different time and place. So how do you deal with that sort of that tension between familiarity, unfamiliarity, between, yeah, I guess making somebody of their time and making them appeal to a modern reader, if that makes sense?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. There's a continuum there that authors choose, right? I choose to be more historically accurate simply because that's my background, right? So I tend to look at a heroine or a hero and say, what's happening now? That was also interesting in the past. So, for example, I had a whole series called the Lindau Castle series. One of the threads running through there was addiction because there was a huge amount of laudanum addiction going on at the time. And Lindau Castle was written, finished about 4 years ago. So America was having a huge addiction crisis. And that gives me the ability to bring experiences that people are having now into the past in a historical way. So I've written about PTSD from returning war heroes. I've written all kinds of stuff like that. This book, one of the things I think that women are facing right now is increasing restrictions on our behavior,
Mm,
on what is considered proper. And so I thought it was really fun. Evie has married this man, for money, very straightforwardly, to get her sister a dowry, so her sister can marry for love, which she never was able to. But, and she's incredibly proper. But there's a scene right at the beginning. She has one little scene, and then we launch into the book, and she's in a small Scottish village, and a whole stream of piglets come down the road, right? And they're on the way to market, all the piglets. And I grew up on a farm. My dad was a poet, and no money, so his father was a farmer. So we grew up on a farm where we didn't actually do the farming, but animals were everywhere, and baby pigs will just fall over and sleep. So all the baby pigs take a nap. And one of them goes up and leans against Evie's ankle and falls asleep. And that is Peony. And that's the moment. So I wanted to have a moment in which you saw the ultra proper young gentlewoman make a decision for herself. And that was it. When she rescues Peony, when she says, "What is the pig?" and her husband says, "What are you doing? That's a pig." She says, "No, it's my pet."
mm,
And she puts a ribbon around Peony and takes her into the carriage. And her husband is appalled. That's improper. That's inappropriate. It's, not even a dog would be really proper. That's the moment when my heroine starts making decisions for herself about which rules she wants to follow and which she doesn't. And so if I'm thinking of a through line with the present, her husband turns out to be the villain of the book, as you can imagine. We spend a lot of time now trying to figure out who are the good people and who are the bad people. And I'll just add one thing. It is also inflected by the fact that my daughter is in 26 and doing dating apps, right? So I hear a lot of, the dates that, she had one and they've been talking. The conversations were so incredibly wonderful. And he showed up and he didn't speak English. He had been talking through ChatGPT.
Wow.
So that inability to understand someone, the wish to find someone who speaks your language is also in there. The first person she met basically in the courtyard is this really grumpy solicitor,
Mm.
Godric, and he's one of my favorite heroes, I think.
He's wonderful.
Thank
And
you.
what I really like about Evie is that, she knows the rules and so she can break them intelligently,
Mhm.
which is something that I always love in a heroine and in a writer. I do have a question eventually about Godric, but first I kind of want to ask about, as you write, your relationship to tropes. Because to me, they kind of function the way that rules can. They can like set expectations, but they can also subvert them.
hmm Yeah, I love them. I mean, I just think they're totally fun. And also, they're a way, I've had such a long career, right? That I have to pay attention to what tropes young women are liking at any given time. The pirate trope, for example, was a really big one when I started writing in 2000 was my first book published. That is no more because consent, so you have to be reading romance a lot. I can tell when someone I know their career is going to end when they say I just can't read romance anymore because you got to see where people are. What do they want to read? Are they into Cinderella? Is it an escape right now? What kind of an escape is it? Gothic is huge, right? Taylor Swift is like, I love Gothic. Just give me a ghost. Why is Gothic so huge, right? Why do we want to escape into a manageable fictional landscape in which a woman is isolated but finds her way out? Um, question for the ages there, but
Question for my therapist, maybe too. Um, so that's really interesting, looking at the way that tropes have, risen or fallen in popularity over time. Have you noticed anything similar with covers? I know that romance covers have changed dramatically over the years, but have you seen that in your own covers, like working with various publishers and artists? Has there been trends there?
oh yeah, there's totally trends. If you look at the cover of The Last Lady Bee, this cover responds to the birth of AI because my publisher, Simon Schuster, and also HarperCollins, which was my publisher for a long time, have declared they are not using AI in their covers at all.
Great.
So in this case, what they did was they found a young artist, and for those of you listening to it, I'm just showing the cover here to Jen. This young artist is a young guy who they showed me a bunch of his automobile ads and things that he'd done for magazines. He'd never done any romance, and they said he has a really distinct style. If you look at this, no one else could have made Evie. If you've looked at his body of work, you instantly know he did it. And I think that's going to become more and more valuable to look at it and to recognize that a human made that and a human thought about what Evie was like. So you look at her little expression and her smirk and the fact she's got her hands on her hips and she's turned and she's got, a swirl of snowflakes around her. It's very human authored. And
Mm.
the book is very human authored too, because we also signed something saying we're not going to do any AI. Um, but I think the new thing in covers right now is that. So,
Mm.
for example, I sometimes self-publish stories. I wrote serialization once for Amazon, and then they give me the contract, and then I'm like, okay, I got to find a cover artist. So I'm dealing right now with a wonderful cover artist. But one of the fascinating things that people do now is you see them making the cover on Instagram, right? Because they have their own followers and you can watch them make the cover. I had a young woman make she made a sort of an inset clinch for a previous book and she oil painted it. And my fans are like watching her oil painted and then they could order from the Rift Bodice and they could get the oil painting of what her favorite scene was in the book. So I think things like that are going to become more and more precious because they are authentic,
Mm.
the creative.
I do sort of enjoy how it seems like the book is becoming an art object again. Because I know that this
Mhm.
also has an exclusive like gorgeous art book edition with the sprayed edges and a gorgeous cover and all of that.
Yeah.
It's a little medieval almost. If you know, it's like a little like the book is returning as a prestige object.
Yeah. Yeah, as a beautiful thing. I
Hmm.
think it's really fun. I'm going to do a Kickstarter in the fall. I've got a family called the Chaldicots and the Greystokes who've been fighting since the time of Henry VIII. And so every one of the little novellas opens with a historical, something that happened in the court. And then in the next court, the Queen Elizabeth and moving forward. And I'm going to do a Kickstarter to publish those as a box set. You remember box sets? I mean, they were when I was little, they were so great. They were so fabulous. This is going to have individual covers, but then the artist is making sort of a group diorama that goes all the way around the outside of the box set. Um, and I'm happy because I like writing, I like reading in print, and I like beautiful things. So it's all good.
So back to the book itself, I did have a question about Sir Godric. I I love how grumpy he is at the outset. That is one of my favorite tropes. I love like a grumpy and a sunshine, even if it's like a sort of grounded, pragmatic sunshine, I think here. Um, what is your approach to, well, I guess let me restart that question. When you are writing the sort of romantic foil for your protagonist, what comes first? Is it his inherent character traits, or do you reverse engineer from the tension or the vibe that you want to create between the two characters? I guess where in the process did he emerge as a fleshed out person?
Well, when she meets him in the courtyard, she is ticking off the things that she would see in a Gothic novel. So she's like, evil butler, check. Housekeeper, check, right? Oh, villain, definitely a villain. He's got a scar so he had a scar in his eyebrow. I write that, check. I have no idea why he has a scar in his eyebrow. So you read the book, you'll find out why, but I had to find out with you. So one of the things is because her husband is quite evil in his own way. My hero is particularly virtuous. He is a fighter. He's a warrior. He's very, very protective. One of the really fun things about this book is that, historical romances don't start with a married heroine. And so that meant that in order to keep my people historical, right? They're not just going to jump into bed with each other. That is impossible. It's impossible for her to think about. Um, and she doesn't. It it leads to this real emphasis on longing. It's a book about desire, right? Because they cannot be together. You did see some of that, I have to say, in Bridgerton season 4, if you watch the new one.
Yes.
It's there. I thought they did a really great job with the Cinderella story of the maid and what is his name? Benedict? I mean, he's a sexy guy. So you got that sense of like, oh my God, this is huge. This desire is huge and the obstacles are huge. So that wasn't out yet, but I wanted a huge obstacle. And let me tell you, a husband's about the biggest obstacle you're going to get in the Regency period.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I really love their dynamic and the story goes such interesting places. Like to me, it almost did have that sort of rollicking, almost, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but like that sort of pace of like a Shakespearean comedy where just like, eventually the zany events just start piling up.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to go faster and faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
So by the end, there's a reveal every single chapter. It's just like boom, 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 boom. It was so much fun to write. Really
And then
was.
having to watch people who are committed to at least some level of propriety try to maintain that, while it's always very fun
Yeah,
to
yeah. Well, all kinds of things are happening around them. Yeah.
do. So it sounds like you are writing now, like you are always writing. But yeah, what is on your horizon at the moment after this book is fully behind you?
Well, tomorrow I am turning in the sequel. It's not a sequel because it's a completely different set of characters, but on a contracting basis, I'm turning in the next Gothic adjacent, which is called The Only Miss C instead of The Last Lady B. And I really love that book. So I am going through and doing the very tedious stuff you do at the end when it's coming back from an editor. So you've made her changes. Then you have to go through and do find look, for example, and realize, oh, I used the word look 149 times in one manuscript. You have to go through and say regarded, gazed, whatever, glared. So I'm doing that kind of stuff, but it's going in tomorrow. I'm writing that. And then I'm also writing a contemporary. I wrote a contemporary tearjerker romance under my own name, under Mary Bly. It's called Lizzie and Dante. And I'm writing another one. That one was Romeo and Juliet. So my heroine had cancer. And it was really, the question was, would Romeo and Juliet have loved each other if they knew they didn't have much time? And the answer is yes. This one is going to be coming off of King Lear. So in King Lear, he has 3 daughters and he's going to divide all his land among them. That's the whole thing about King Lear. And he says, who loves me the best? Well, in my novel, the King Lear figure is a retired rock star, and he actually has about 12 children. And there is that question, who loves me, but who's really my child? Now we figured out with DNA. But my heroine is an American who doesn't need any money from a rock star. So, she's the Cordelia of King Lear. You don't have to have read the play or anything, but again, teaching things for so long, you think about them a lot, and it's just so much fun to let those thoughts turn into a novel, like Lizzie and Dante and Romeo and Juliet. They're not Romeo and Juliet, but that thought is there. If Romeo and Juliet knew they only had 4 days.
That sounds absolutely lovely. I am so excited to see these things coming out. Thank you. It sounds like, your schedule is incredibly busy, so I especially appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and share your book with our listeners.
It was totally a pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too. And listeners, please check out The Last Lady Bee. By the time that you hear this episode, it'll be out in the world, so you can head to your favorite bookstore or library or website, wherever you like to go for books. Do you have a favorite place you like to send people to? I know you name dropped The Ripped Bodice, which I absolutely adore.
I do like The Ripped Bodice. Yeah. And they have they made a special bookmark for it. There's like a little fan with a picture of, a couple on it. So if you want to order from The Ripped Bodice in Brooklyn, you get the fan. That's nice.
It's a good incentive.
Yes. I will also say that since that is my local, I sign those books if you want. If you order online, you could simply say how you want it. If you want me to say for you or what your name is, or for your aunt, or if you just want it signed. So
great. All right. That's a good deal. I'll drop that link in the show notes so you can check it out at home. Thank you once again, everybody. It is time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.